Hi, I'm Mara Lathrop, and we're here today with Laura Ferrer and Jonathan Foster to talk about the film that they brought to the Port Townsend Film Festival, Not That Funny. So welcome, you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's just start with the standard question that all Port Townsend people love to ask: how do you like us so far?
How do you like us so far?
Yeah.
Well, we love you. We think
Well,
you're both very funny.
The love is mutual.
That's really great. This is your first time in Port Townsend?
It is my first time, yes.
And this is our little festival.
It's a terrific festival. And it's one of the ones that whenever you mention it to other people, they'll say, oh, Port Townsend, I love Port Townsend. They love their filmmakers there. And it really is clear that that's the case. It's lovely here.
And it is different too. There's
Yeah.
a fun edge to everything that is palpable, that is not across the board at every festival.
Some
Oh,
festivals
geez.
are pretty serious about doing business.
Yeah.
We're just here to have a good time.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
clear.
That's
and,
great.
And we love it.
Yeah.
So let's Not That Funny, which is a great title for a comedy. Let's start by talking about the genesis of the film. Jonathan, you're the screenwriter.
Yes.
And what came first, your script?
This is actually, a lot of stories come from different places. This one came from this idea of somebody trying to be funny that was not, that wanted to learn how to be funny. And I thought of it years ago, and the title just kind of landed. I'm typically very bad at titles.
Yeah.
This one just kind of locked in. And we stuck with the title to the very end. A lot of times titles will change. So it was an idea that I had a long time ago, and wasn't able to get any traction, never actually completed it. And years go forward, and Laura Lee, I'm up in Seattle. Laura Lee is down in Los Angeles, and she calls me up on the phone and says, hey, we have an opportunity to make this. And so that's the early genesis of the
That's fabulous.
the idea, right.
You guys, you were telling me before, you guys have known each other since the 80s when you were in grad school together.
Right. As we say, just shortly after the earth cooled. So,
Yes.
USC,
Yeah.
the earth cooled. USC started a graduate program, and then we met. So that's pretty much.
What is it like as filmmakers to have like such a relationship with another creative person of such long standing? How has it impacted both of your work? Laura Lee, why don't you start?
Well, okay. The older you get, the less willing you are to do anything that is unpleasant or inconvenient, and you realize that it's all about your friends and having a good time. That's why Port Townsend is such a great film festival for us, because it doesn't take itself too seriously, and yet it puts the people here put a great deal of effort and energy into caring for each other and for the community and for the work and for the filmmakers, which is exactly what it should be. So when you make a film that way, you care about the art, you care about the community you're filming in, and you care about the people who you are working with. Mm-hmm. So those people become your friends.
And ultimately, kind of more like your family, right?
In many ways, right. Like
Yeah.
your chosen family, as many people put it. So the fact that Jonathan and I were friends for so long was part of not only what made the writing process pleasant, but some of the choices we made about the characters themselves.
And how much? So the script wasn't completely finished, but then you had an opportunity. So you finished the script together.
Right. In fact, the unfinished script was thrown away because there were elements. Most of the
Not that funny.
Not that funny.
we just had to start over.
Start over.
It wasn't not that funny enough.
Yeah.
Is the
Yeah.
problem. So we just started from scratch, and we had this deadline. We had a little bit of money to make the movie that Laura Lee was able to put together. I'll tell her part of the story is she's friends with an actor by the name of Tony Hale, who's well known for Arrested Development,
Right.
Buster Bluth, and now currently on Veep on HBO.
You're good at this, dude.
Plug there.
Absolutely.
Beep.
Veep, see it Saturday nights at I don't know. Anyhow, so we saw that as an opportunity. The kind of the genesis of three things that you would need: a director, a writer, and we wrote this 50%, 50%, right down the middle, which was great because she was going to be the one directing it, and I don't see how someone can not be integral to the writing process if they're going to direct
Absolutely.
a movie. So that was basically the process. We started from scratch and work on it together. The core ideas were there, but it was a different movie.
Once you started filming, how did the script evolve during the process?
How did it evolve? You mean how did we work back and forth with each other?
Well, how did the script change while you were filming?
Oh my gosh,
How the
yes.
ideas sort of, ideas
Yeah,
have
no,
a way
it's-
of snowballing once you're actually, behind a camera.
It's a great question for this movie, in fact.
Yeah.
Right.
So
As you probably well know, one of the tenets of no-budget filmmaking is that you use who you have and what you have.
Right.
So when we figured out who we were going to cast and we figured out what our locations were going to be, then we rewrote around those things. So we knew what the core of our characters were and what the core of our plot or our story was about. But then we rewrote previous to shooting once we knew who we'd cast, and then we rewrote on the fly all the time. I mean, one of the things that Jonathan talks about is just how I would call him during the day and say, we just lost the shoe repair place, so now Kevork has to own a auto body repair place, and we're on our way over to that place right now. Is that going to upset anything in the script, and what do we need to change? And is it okay if we change a line that says this, it'll cover for the fact that we had him, so
he's
you're
not
losing-
making shoes anymore.
He's not
Right.
making shoes anymore. He's repairing cars, and
Right.
so.
I know what I want to ask. Comedy is such a fragile thing. What were a couple of your favorite surprises that happened during the filming? Either something that an actor brought to a table, or some bird flying by, or
Right.
something amazing that made it into the film that you just didn't know until you had caught it.
Three things come directly to mind that were surprises in filming: Tony, and Tony.
All right,
Tony
please
is-
elaborate.
Tony is the funniest guy I know.
Yeah.
And to cast Tony as a guy who is very serious, trying to become funny and failing at it, all you have to do is just get out of the way of that. So probably our biggest challenge was to not let it go too broad, because we didn't want it to be a broad comedy. We wanted it to be something simple. We wanted it to have an undercurrent of meaningful ideas, and we wanted it to be charming. So, and also, I think personally, I just had an agenda of knowing what a great actor that Tony is, and seeing him as Buster Bluth, and now as Gary in the comedy Veep. Sunday nights at sorry. It's not surprising that people want to continue to cast him in the same kind of role because he's so good at it.
Right.
But I knew that he had
Other colors.
Yes, right, other colors. Well put.
Yeah.
And we wanted the opportunity to be able to explore those, and boy, we really had it with him. Probably one of the things that comes to mind, the surprising things, we had cast another friend by the name of Nick Thune, who plays a stand-up comedian in the movie. And Nick's just a wild card, he is.
Oh, I thought he was when I
very
saw him. He's
funny.
very funny.
Yeah, he's very funny, and he's a wild card. And he showed up. You've seen the film, so you'll know what I mean when I say this. He showed up with his dog one day, and we thought, that's interesting. Why don't we just write the dog into the scene? So it was originally just a scene between Tony and Nick. And because he brought his dog,
the dog totally makes that scene.
totally.
Yeah.
So we thought, well, if he's going to bring his dog, why don't we just have him carry the dog around the whole time, and then he can give the dog to Tony to make him feel awkward and uncomfortable standing there holding a dog. And it just worked beautifully. So that was one of those serendipitous moments. You really have to go with it if you're in a no-budget film. Control costs money.
Right.
So you have to be willing to just let everything happen and find those found moments of comedy or availability. For example, like back with locations, you'll talk to somebody who'll say you can come and shoot there, and then they get cold feet or something, and they may say, well, the last time that you movie people came, whatever that means, you wrecked our floors or something, so we can only let you shoot between this half hour and that half hour, and we want $1,000.
And you can't stand on the floor.
And you can't stand on the floor.
Yeah.
As long as you can do that. So then it will happen. It just does. That you go next door to get a cup of coffee and express that, and they say, well, you can shoot here. That'd be a blast. We think that would be fun. So you move everything over to the coffee place and call Jonathan on the phone and say, is it okay if it's a coffee shop instead of,
Ugh, right.
Yeah. So you
That's great.
You have to be ready to roll with that kind of stuff.
So
Which makes it fun.
All right. And I think so too. What
As long as you find stress fun.
I think the idea of doing anything like this with a really low budget I think it sounds so scary, and it really goes back to what you said about, control costs
Yes,
money.
it does.
Right. So I'd like to talk a little bit about how this film emerged after the filming through the editing process to be what it is. Where were the surprises? Where were the surprises along the way once you had all your film in the can? Did the story? What were the elements of the story that changed at that point?
Well, many things changed. As soon as we started cutting it together, that's when you find out whether you've overshot or undershot.
Right.
And the good part about using all of your friends, and we shot in my apartment, the place where I live, and one of the key elements in the film is that the main character is trying to repair a dilapidated old house. And the reason, again, that we wrote that into it is because I live in a dilapidated old house, and that's what our location was. So we
Right.
decided to make that part of what he does, So while we were in editing, what you find out is whether you've shot too many scenes, whether certain scenes are necessary or not. When you think through as a writer, when you're writing a script and you're thinking, we've got to make sure that this logic right here is clear.
Right.
And then we need to make sure that we take those 4 steps so that this logic is clear. So the audience is not lost and they're not confused about what's going on, and
that they'll stay with
exactly.
their characters, right.
Because there's something insulting about not walking them all the way there with you. So they feel like they lean back and think, I don't know what's happening, and they feel left out of it, so to speak. The thing is, though, whenever you get into editing, you discover how much of that logic is really necessary.
Right.
And maybe you've shot, if the characters go from point 1 to point 10, and you've shot every point in between, you discover that you really can just cut directly to point 10. And there's something actually even exciting to the audience about that, because they're able to make the leap with you. They leap, and they make it. Mm-hmm. And when they do, it feels fun.
It feels great.
Right?
Yeah.
And then to have gone through all those steps in the meanwhile would feel tedious, like, we get it, for God's sake. So you don't always know at screenplay level, certainly, and you don't know when you're shooting. You cover because you know what it would take for you to get everything and everybody back together.
Right.
And then in editing, you find out how much of that you need and how much of it you don't. For example, we shot, I think it was 4 scenes between the grandmother and the granddaughter in the kitchen, where is their life connection place, as often is. And we ended up cutting that down to 2 scenes. And I was then, but even more so now, a big proponent of having actors wear the same wardrobe all the time. Mm-hmm. So, wardrobe people hate me for this, because they love to have an arc of character that is evidenced in the fact that the characters' colors get darker and darker,
or whatever.
But you know what?
Yeah.
We're the same thing. Because then those 4 scenes, when we discovered we really only needed to cut them down to 2, we were able to do that because we didn't mess up our continuity. And you know who else does that? Francis Ford Coppola. So I figured as soon as I read that,
you thought you'd do it too.
Well, Frank and I were like this. So as directors,
like that.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
Yeah.
So what broke your heart that you had to leave out because you didn't need it? There are always those gems that you want to put on the outtake reel, right?
It's funny. I remember specifically being brokenhearted. Like, I even remember calling you and saying, we've got to cut this scene.
We have to cut this scene.
And I don't remember now what it was.
I
was just thinking that last night when we watched it, and realizing, it's all there. And whatever it was that we were brokenhearted about that we had to get rid of, I don't even now remember it.
There's some fun moments that Tony would do, maybe silent moments or stuff that had to get trimmed out, and it's good that it was. You don't miss the audience won't miss it, but they're little moments, like you say, for the outtake reel or something like that. It's
so you guys is this the first film you've worked on together? I know you've known each other since the 80s. Have you worked on other projects together?
What the hell have you guys been doing for all those decades?
No, not what the hell. No, but is this...
We watched a lot of movies together.
That's really cool.
And we actually worked on a theater project that Laura
right.
Lee was in charge of, collaborated on that for some time.
This is our first film together.
And a dream come true. We've
Really?
been wanting to do that since the 80s, essentially.
What was it? What was it about Jonathan that turned out to be the most annoying thing that you had never known about him until you were working on this project together? And I'll let you go first, but I'm going to let him rebuttal.
Okay.
Nothing.
Nothing.
No, well, if you're going to let him go after me.
All right, well, Jonathan, would
was
you
all
like to go
perfect.
first?
Most annoying
Well,
thing.
surprising, annoying, secret that she would never want you to reveal about her, whatever. Look at them. They're as thick as thieves.
Okay.
Tell her about the thing.
No, really, the most annoying thing, I think, comes from a very small place in me, and it's whenever she would, and this is typical, right, in a collaboration.
Right.
I'd have a good idea, and she'd take it to a better place. But that's the reason we work together. And it's
Right.
not
Hate
really
that.
annoying, but there is a side of me that goes, oh, I wish I'd gotten that one, I wish I'd had that thought.
But she never would have gotten it that far if you hadn't, started the process.
Precisely.
Right?
And so, like I
Which
say,
is what
it's-
annoys me. Is that I would never have taken it there without him in the first
What
place.
annoys
No,
me
I'm
is
kidding.
nothing
It's not
annoys
annoying
me.
at all.
It annoys
Yeah.
her about me.
Yeah, but that bugs me about you.
Yeah, and that bugs
Yeah.
me about you.
Okay,
So
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 are you
gonna-
happy now?
I am. Are you?
We've
Are
done
you
so
guys?
well before.
So was it a good enough experience that you want to do this again?
We are
Or
doing it again right now.
Are
currently,
you? What are you working
I
on
don't
now?
even right now, but
we could.
we are doing this together,
Yeah,
aren't
that's
we?
true.
We are working on another project together now. Jonathan's writing, and it's so cool.
Are
I
you?
mean,
Are you willing to talk about it at all, or is it a big secret?
It's not a big secret. It's just a very large, ambitious, and complicated project to
Yeah.
explain. But briefly,
And we
I will
I
say,
saw we only have 5, which is
Okay.
probably now
5.
down to 2, 3.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
We got 3
Colby,
minutes.
tell us the truth. You can take it. It is a very large project called Praying the Hours, and by
Yeah.
the time we will be through, it will be a feature-length, dramatic narrative and 8 30-minute shorts
Wow.
as a package. So think of like a TV series and a feature that we're working on now. And Jonathan is writing several of the segments with me on it. So.
Great.
Along with other writers. There's a
Yeah.
whole team. It's a very large collaborative piece across every contribution point.
We are testing the boundaries of no-budget filmmaking and community art making.
So I have a
together.
question about
Ask her.
Not So Funny.
Trust
so,
yourself.
You said that you had no budget.
On Not That Funny, we did have a budget. I mean,
What
it was
your
a low
budget?
budget?
What was it?
I have been asked not to say.
That's fine.
But I will say...
But I can't. Yes, but we can tell you our code words for it.
Well, and also I called the WGA. I'm a member of the guild, and
Good
so
one.
I asked, what's the qualification for low budget? And I told them the number, and they said, oh, that's considered a no budget. That's what the guild calls a no budget film. So
and
it was
we
that
were
way.
a Screen Actors Guild signatory, and it was considered by them an ultra low budget, which I think is code
Right.
for you guys are kidding, right?
Right.
No, that's not really true. Abby Dillon, who's the head of SAG Indie, for that committee for
Yeah.
SAG,
I remember before we actually had ultra low budget and experimental and student
whole-
film didn't exist. So.
her whole deal is all about making sure that SAG actors get to work in wonderful projects like this.
Well, it hasn't always been the case, so God
No, it
bless
really
her for making
hasn't.
that possible. Because all 4 of our leads were SAG actors, so we wouldn't, or actually 5 of them were SAG actors, so we wouldn't have been able to do it without that. So my blessing to her through you for
she'll be
making
here in
that
a little
possible.
while. Make sure I introduce you to her. Okay.
I'll walk toward her on my knees for that gratitude. Too
she
far?
would-
Tell
too-
me if
too
it's too
far.
far. I
It's
don't.
too
Okay,
far,
I won't.
really.
I won't do that.
If
Too
you
far.
could,
I'll wave.
If,
Thank you. Too little?
that's too little. Yeah.
Okay.
If
I
you
can
wave like the
I can do the
queen.
Pope thing. The
Yeah.
Queen. I don't have the Queen down.
The elbow,
What is
elbow,
that?
wrist,
This is the queen.
Okay,
the
too
queen
far.
waves like this.
This is usually
Oh,
how
that's
you
the
can tell an
Queen. I was
interview has come to an
Rose
end. This is
Parade.
Yeah.
we're starting to
Thank you for
practice our
joining.
writing.
Thank you so much
having
for
us.
joining us. Thank you for being here in Port Townsend.
Thank you.
And I'm waiting to see your next project. Thanks a lot.
We're going to make another one just so we can come back here.
Awesome.
Bring it here.
All right. We would
Thank
love
you.
to have you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
And thanks, Colby and Chris.
Yeah.
And everyone in the
And
room.
Tom and Ross and
These wonderful people.